How do I move forward with my life while my best friend slash roommate potentially suffers because of it? I first started hooking up with a coworker, 32 aka, about 5 years ago that lasted for about 2 months. I lived close to work while she lived on the other side of the city. I would invite her to crash at the place I was staying at, townhouse with 3 other people, so she could get to work via cab that didn't cost her an arm and a leg to get to and from work. An incident on a city bus traumatized her from ever taking them again, whenever she had consecutive shifts. I ended up calling off the hookups after 2 months because I didn't want that responsibility of there being sex in our friendship, but I wanted to remain good friends because she is an extremely selfless person with a very kind heart and I saw good in her. AS living situation back at her parents', even to this day, was very toxic. Alcoholic parents that stressed her out all while working retail. Her mother is narcissistic, doesn't work and bullies her husband emotionally while spending his money. Her dad is too much of an old school person to end things with her. He believes the woman he fell in love with is still there somewhere. It is unknown to everyone why he drinks the way that he does. On weekends he will consume a 30-pack of beer in a single night for multiple nights. Sometimes he will miss work because of his drinking, but he has too much seniority at the company he works for the company to can him. Probably because of the amount of years and the severance involved. Her mother hasn't worked in over 10 years. No idea why, it definitely wasn't health related. She also has had an affair with another individual. I myself am an introvert that loves solitude and just doing my own thing. I am extremely selfish. I've never had a relationship in my entire life by choice. I just can't be bothered with another person's problems. I do not crave physical or emotional feelings that would go beyond just being friends, but I am a very bad people pleaser, bad in a sense that I often burn myself to keep others warm. I usually spend my time playing video games to disassociate from the world and to recharge my batteries. A hermit, if you will. I do have a few select friends that I consider to be extremely close to me that I cherish dearly. A is a very kind-hearted and selfless individual. She has a younger brother by 4 years. She has one of the best work ethics I've ever seen in someone and has won multiple awards at work because of it. She will give you the shirt off of her back. She also happens to have OCD and ADHD, suffers a lot from anxiety and has an eating disorder. She used to smoke cigarettes, marijuana, and MAPI to handle the stress of life, but today she only smokes marijuana to get by. She lived mostly sheltered and didn't venture much away from home, partly due to her mother being so selfishly strict while her dad was that let her be free type of parent. I continued to offer my room as a place for refuge for about a year and we became very, very close before I decided that I no longer wanted to live in a townhouse, but to get an apartment. I knew that I wasn't going to be able to afford it on my own, so I decided to ask A if she was willing to share a 2-bedroom apartment with me. She said yes, and in December of 21 we moved in together. Before we moved in, we were very clear that we both did not have feelings for each other because that would obviously complicate things. More should have been discussed about living together, but we eventually would cross those bridges as time went on. It started out pretty smooth, but issues quickly started to arise. I was spending too much time with my hobby that she started to feel isolated, that being in her room reminded her of being at home because that's where she would go when shit would hit the fan at her parents'. I was asked to spend more time with her in general, so I agreed. She also has a lot of trauma from living with an abusive ex, so much that she had a lot of walls up at the start. Anytime I was on my PC, mind you, I originally wanted my setup in my bedroom, but she felt that it would isolate her, so I decided to put my setup in the living room. She felt that I didn't want to be bothered at all while I was playing. I told her that I wasn't doing anything, that I didn't need to be bothered, and that if she needed to talk to me about anything while I played that she could do so. Easier said than done. Of course, I had to remind her often that she can come talk to me if she needed anything. Even to this day, living together for 2 years so far, she thinks I do not want to be bothered while I play, but I tell her that it's okay. Eating at the apartment became an issue because I was mostly fending for myself at the start. She didn't know what to eat and wouldn't eat unless we both were eating together. So eating what I wanted to turned into eating what we wanted to. When the opportunity came for me to go downtown with some friends for an evening of drinks and chit-chat, AS anxiety would show up in full force. She didn't want to be left alone in this end of the city that she's not familiar with. She wouldn't eat and would always say, "Well, what about me?" as if I was responsible for providing a comfortable solution for her while I was out. The friends that I would meet up with are old CO workers that she's worked with before, but she has an issue with one of them, due to opinions and trigger words that were said. She has an issue with alcohol, mostly because of her parents. She would fear I would have too much and possibly remind her of her dad. I'd probably go out maybe twice a year for drinks, if at all. I eventually stopped going out altogether. The same can be said for when I wanted to go to the gym. That my meals would need to be done properly if I were to see success at the gym. She moaned and made it a thing about what would she do when it came to eating because I had to eat certain things that she couldn't eat on her own. I didn't end up going to the gym. I will make this part short. She had a dog since she was a teenager. He was her light in the darkness. Her dog was her ride or die back home when her parents would go at it. When we moved in, she would go home on Sundays to do laundry and to see her dog. After about a year of living together, did we finally start to bring her dog over for the weekend so she could be with him. I grew attached to him. He ended up passing away in May of this year due to a quick and sudden decline in his health and quality of life. He was 13 years old. It was an extremely tough time to deal with. Her mother did not make the experience any better, but made it worse. She was inconsiderate and vile. I personally believe that she hated the dog and wanted nothing to do with him. So when the time came for us to take him to the vet, she felt the need to come along to make sure the deed was done. She wasn't remorseful or showed any signs of empathy, but made jokes and did not take the situation seriously. Her mother, A, and I were in the room at the vet when her dog was put down. The nurse said to take as long as we needed to and to hit a red button when we were ready to leave. Her mother got up and hit the red button on her way out after about 10 seconds of us mourning and waited in the car. The nurse came but we said that we needed more time and we didn't press it. I'll never forgive her mother for that. After her dog had passed, my shoes suddenly got a whole lot bigger. A and I became closer than ever. She no longer had her safe blanket that was her dog. It all fell onto me. As the months would pass, every weekend where we would have the dog became a depressing time together. She was used to seeing him on weekends that to this day, she hasn't shaken that feeling. I don't blame her at all. She lost her one and only and said that she would never get another dog to replace him. She started to become more dependent on me. I needed to be with her whenever she walked her dog, before he passed, because she didn't like the neighborhood. We are in a building just outside of a college. It's relatively safe, but this end of the city does see some emergency services from time to time. I'd do our laundry together for us in our building because she doesn't want to run into people she doesn't know. Anytime I went out to shop, she wanted constant updates as to where I was. Once, I went to a grocery store and back without a word back to her during the trip and she threw a fit because she thought something happened. If I happen to have the day off from work but she doesn't, she wants me to constantly message her. For a guy that doesn't want to have to deal with other people's problems, was dealing with other people's problems, but it was my best friend's problems. The months following her dog passing is where I started to feel a very sudden drop in my mental health, as well as financial stress. Her bedroom has become a place where her and her dog used to be. But she cannot sleep in that room currently because that's where her and her dog would spend time together. It's closed off to preserve his scent that she misses dearly. I offered my bed to sleep in, knowing she wouldn't be able to sleep on her own, and she still does to this day. I don't mind it much, but I do miss sleeping alone. I used to spend a good 4 hours a day on my hobby during the work week, enjoying myself after work, after taking care of any errands and dinner, but that has been whittled down to an hour a day, if at all. Not because I got bored, but because AS isolation and feeling of abandonment would change her mood for the evening. I had asked for more personal time to unwind, but she made it about herself and her depression. She'd get in her own head and her mood would change. I pick up too much on emotion, so much that if she was off then I was off. And if I was off, I couldn't enjoy myself. A started to get me involved in her family's struggles in person. We both would visit her parents and she has had a screaming match with her father and mother on separate occasions while I was in the room. That would take a toll on me as well. We started to argue a lot more. I started to see her mother come out of her. The narcissism, gaslighting, and selfishness was starting to pour out of A. We both were going through a lot and it was becoming more and more difficult to bear. Financially, I started to struggle as well because of the cost of living was starting to get absurd. I'd often find myself having to borrow money off of family to make ends meet, despite working full-time. I'd budget and cut out luxuries, but still it wouldn't be enough. On top of this, my parents have been dealing with health issues. My mother is constantly in and out of the hospital, often spending up to a week there. My father is the only one working and bringing in an income, but he'll have days where he has to leave work early, losing out on wages, to tend to my mother needing to go to the hospital. It's just the two of them at home. My mother lost weight, wasn't eating, has liver issues and was suffering from hallucinations, often being awake for an entire evening on no sleep. It's taking a huge toll on my father. I asked him a while back how things were going. My mother's health issues started about 5 years ago but have suddenly ramped up a bit in severity, and he broke down over the phone to me. It was the first time in my life that I've ever heard him cry. He's mentally and financially struggling as well. My job is no help as well. I work in a position where not a whole lot happens and I'm often left with a lot of downtime with nothing to do and nowhere to go because I need to be at my station during the day. It's in retail and extremely unfulfilling. I can't give up this job because the schedule is a consistent Monday to Friday, early in, early out. I'd be giving that up and getting a lower wage if I were to get work somewhere else. Job hunting in the city is pretty bad right now, with all the international students looking for work as well. I've been to college a few times but have never stuck to anything, so I don't have any real skill set to work with, other than my years in customer service. I started to evaluate my current position. Moving home back to my parents would be both mentally and financially better for me. I would transfer to the store back home and work overnight so that my dad can go to work right when I'd be getting home from a shift. The family only has one vehicle to work with. Less bills, more money to take care of personal debt and to invest in a vehicle for myself. I'd be able to help out at home financially as well, along with the house chores so my parents wouldn't have to worry about it. Moving home doesn't have a single negative thing about it. Other than that, I would be damning my best friend to move back home to the toxic environment that is her parents' house. I haven't had a proper sit down with my best friend about the seriousness of our situation, other than mildly talking about it during an argument. I've personally have never had to be open about my feelings and emotions before, and I often find myself either stumbling or losing my place while talking when emotions are high. All I know is that I am 35 years old and I need to, for once in my life, put myself before others, for the betterment of my health and well-being. But I'll be condemning my best friend to the possibility of her having to live back home with her parents. She doesn't trust anyone or know of anyone else that she would be willing to live with if I were to sublet the apartment. The apartment was the last known place for her dog to be at, and she cannot part ways with the apartment as well because of it. We have a little setup where he used to lay down it, along with his stuffed toys. We also are in possession of his ashes. I care for her deeply. She has been through so much in her life that I, as well as her new nephew, am one of the few lights in her life. We get along extremely well when everything is going great. Lots of inside jokes, we got the same humor and we just click. I am not in love with her, romantically, but care for her that I would do anything for her. I know what I must do for myself, but I don't know how to do it. Comment. You gave her the most support anyone could have ever given her, but you can't carry her problems on your back as well as yours all the time. It's her responsibility to fix it and get through life and stop depending on someone to help her all the time. Like what would happen later when you do meet a girl and get married and have a family. I mean, you can't just take her with you. She has to build her own life regardless. Do you see yourself getting in a serious relationship someday? Well, then I suppose you can offer your lifelong friend room and board at your house with the express condition she gets a job.